a bunch of kids are coming by, about 3 or 4 girls and a couple of nice young men, and they're in their, early 16, late 17, 18. That's about the age. So I felt very safe in going up and saying to the students, bonjour, je suis une Canadienne. Je voudrais vous poser une question, s'il vous plaît, si vous avez le temps. No problem. I said, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire, le chemin des Juifs? Oh, on ne sait pas. We don't know. Let me think about it. So they go off in a little huddle, and they come back. Je crois que nous avons la réponse correcte. Notre professeur d'histoire nous a dit que c'est le chemin que les Juifs de l'âge médiéval ont pris pour aller à Jérusalem. In other words, this is the road, our teacher told us that this is the road that the Jews took during the Middle Ages when they were on their way to Jerusalem.
Life in Belgium was paradise. I was about 6 months old when we arrived in Belgium. My father right away started his own tailor shop. We lived in a Jewish neighborhood, which would you call today a ghetto. It was a ghetto. But there was a good rapport. All the Jewish people did get along together. And in one street where we lived was at least 3 or 4 synagogues. They called it stables. And it was paradise. Everything was fantastic until the Germans occupied Belgium. They didn't even declare war on Belgium. They just started to enter the country. And Belgium, Holland, and France was occupied in 18 days. The biggest shock, I still can't believe it. The minute we arrived at the French-Belgian border, the Germans were there already. So there was no use going any further. So we went back to Antwerp and hoping for the best. At the beginning, the Germans did not bother us. So we felt maybe it's not as bad as people thought it was. We heard so much going on in Poland, but sadly enough, we didn't believe it. Then slowly, laws came out one after the other. The Yellow Star, Jewish people are not allowed in the park, Jewish people can't go to schools anymore, just these laws one after the other. But it's still not the end of the world. We felt it's still safe.
There was a group of 2,252 Jews deported from Belgium who took part in the building of the Jews' Road. They were deported from Belgium in early summer and autumn of 1942, though in fact few of these Jews were born in Belgium. Most came from other countries in Western and Eastern Europe, and one of the Jews in fact came from London. When the Germans came to Belgium, they stripped the Belgian Jews of their civil rights, and they gradually threw them into unemployment, and because they were unemployed, they were labelled by the Germans as antisocial elements. And this, in the mind of the Germans, gave them the right to deport them to be used as unpaid labour. And accordingly, in the summer and autumn of 1942, they were deported mostly from Antwerp to camps in northwest France.
The Germans chose northern France because the Militärverwaltung, so the military government, Belgium, was also responsible for northern France. At a certain moment in June 1942, the Germans decided to introduce the forced labor for Jews. Jews had to work in northern France for the Organisation Todt, so for the construction of the Atlantic Wall on the coast. In total, 9 convoys deported from Belgium to northern France. The first on June the 13th, 1942, from Antwerp, and the last in September the 12th, also 1942, a period of about 3 months. No less than 6 of the 9 convoys to northern France left from Antwerp. In total, about 2,150 Jews were deported to northern France, of which 1,500 Jews from Antwerp, so about 68%.
We received a letter from the Germans that we have to meet at the train station 2 or 3 days ahead to be sent to a French labor camp. We had no idea where. Everybody was in shock. But then we felt, how bad can it be? Just didn't believe the inevitable. We left. We lived only about 10 minutes from the train station. The 5th of August, 1942. We walked over to the train station, which was only about 10 minutes. My mother and my 2 sisters. And when we came to the station, we had our luggage. I kissed my mother, kissed my 2 sisters, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. As I was walking up the stairs towards the trains, I made a big mistake to turn around, and I saw my mother crying. The minute I saw my mother crying, my 2 sisters started to cry, and I started to cry. And even today I felt I should not have turned around, because I've never seen my mother cry. They took away our identification card, and we put us on a train. It took a whole day until we arrived in Dan-Camier.
When the Jews were deported from Belgium, many were initially taken to Lager Tibor at Dam, where they were organised into work parties or groups and sent to different camps along the length of the coast to Pau. There were perhaps some 19 camps, and many of these camps were temporary work camps or commandos associated with particular work sites. The main task for the Jews who were sent to these camps was to labour upon the Atlantic Wall, which was the huge defence which Hitler built along the entire western coast of Europe to defend against Allied invasion. Originally it had been an offensive line to attack shipping in the Channel and that sort of thing, but as the tide of war swung towards Russia and the tide of war swung against Hitler, he requested that the Atlantic Wall would be substantially strengthened, and they needed a huge cohort of labourers to do this. And the Jews were sent to help fortify the wall in the most heavily fortified section along the length of the Côte d'Opale around the Calais and Boulogne area. The narrative of the Holocaust, for very good reasons, concentrates very much on the concentration camps in the East. But many people are unaware of the huge Nazi archipelago of camps and prisons and ghettos which spread across Europe. There were over 43,000 Nazi camps, prisons and ghettos, not just for Jews, but for many other prisoners as well. And the Holocaust was happening right up to the very western edge of Europe. So Jews were in camps and were dying literally in sight of the White Cliffs of Dover. It seems that David Shento may be one of the only living survivors from the Jews' Road, and is one of the few surviving deportees from Belgium itself. Most of the people who were deported with him died either immediately on arrival or shortly after. So in his transport of around 700 men, there are only 4 survivors, including David Shento.
Once we got off the train in Dancamier, which took us a whole day, when we walked towards the camp and when we saw the other prisoners who were there already 2 or 3 months, I couldn't believe how they changed. Skinny, hungry, dirty, and they told us that they're working extremely hard and they're getting rations of bread, which is horrendous, not enough to keep going, especially with all the hard work they had to do. And then all of a sudden it hit me that the Germans could easily win the war over the Jews just to stop feeding them.
The condition in virtually all of these German slave labour camps was very, very poor, very severe. Prisoners at all of these camps suffered severe malnutrition. They had starvation rations. Beatings were extremely common, sometimes murder. Conditions were very primitive. They would be in tents or in barracks, and they had very little medical attention. And very often there would be a single water tap in the camp that prisoners would drink from. There'd be open latrines, and many of the prisoners would be verminous with lice and other parasites.
It was the Wehrmacht. It was not the SS. It was not the Gestapo. We did our work. And once we were inside the camp, they were there when they went out of the camp to work. They brought us back into the camp, and we didn't see them. They did not bother us. It was a labor camp. And as a matter of fact, I was so naive. I figured, if this is it, I'm starving, but I'll make it. Not the end of the world. Wake-up call was 6 o'clock. Our ration was given at 7 o'clock. No enough water to wash ourselves, but then the hunger was setting in. Because it's the work that made it so difficult. And because if you're hungry and you have to work hard, it makes it twice as hard.
When the Jews worked on the Atlantic Wall, they did a lot of labour in concrete. And one important task in that was making roads. Some of concrete, some of other materials. The Jews' Road in itself was an access road going from inland to the coast, a distance of 4 kilometres. And the object of the road was ostensibly to assist Operation Sea Lion, which was Hitler's intended plan to invade England. And certainly it would have provided an access point for heavy vehicles to get onto the beaches near Ardlow, which are huge and ideal for mass disembarkation. Also, it was there to provide a path of heavy equipment to construct the various blockhouses and casements on the coastline at that point. So there's a cluster of defences around there, and it would have been necessary to get access to an otherwise inaccessible part of the coastline. Many of the bunkers along the section of coastline that we're talking about, from the giant cement mixers and lifting equipment to the actual blockhousing construction. All of these blockhouses had to be cast in one go, so you couldn't do a bit on one day and a bit the next day. And the Jews and their German overseers would often be required to work for 36 hours at a stretch to construct one of these blockhouses, which might have many hundreds of tons of concrete in it. So you can imagine that there were starved labourers working without sleep for 3 days, or more sometimes, to get the blockhouses made. It was a terrible strain on the workers, and indeed after the war, some of the Germans were prosecuted for forcing the Jews to engage in acts or works of superhuman labour. When the Jews were deported to northwest France, only men and boys were deported. The women, children, young girls were left back in Belgium. In terms of the ages of the men and boys deported to Belgium, it was a whole range of ages. So from the very young, 14, 15 years old, up to older men. However, the reason for splitting the families was very, very deliberate. The Gestapo and the SS wanted to weaken the family unit. They wanted to remove the protection of the men from the families, so it would then be very easy to deport the rest in Belgium, and that's precisely what happened.
It was horrendous. Then, of course, a month or two later, when one day we did not have to go to work, we are being sent to another camp. And this is when the first time I saw the SS. And I changed from the regular Wehrmacht to the SS. They were abrupt, they were rude, they were beating us. They put us still also on passenger trains. They said, we're going to another camp, we are going home again. We didn't know what they meant. What they meant home again is Poland.
In the summer of 1942, the deportation of Jews to Auschwitz began. So, the Atlantico Jews were an alternative for the other Jews to send them to Auschwitz. From the Antwerp Jews, more than 80% were deported to the Dorsain barracks in Mechelen.
4 days later, 4 o'clock in the morning, I looked out, the train stopped. Something is amiss. Doesn't make sense to me. We had to get off the train, and everybody wanted to take their luggage. You don't take anything with you. Everything stays on the train. So I jumped out of my train, and an elderly gentleman jumped off the train, and he asked very politely, an SS man, I'll leave my luggage. Can I take a couple of pictures? I told him, you don't take anything. And because he asked the second time, the SS man let the dog loose. I just couldn't believe what I saw. The dog just flew in the air straight to the man's neck. The screaming, the yelling, the moaning, the crying was heartbreaking. And I looked at him. He was just right beside me. He was bleeding from his mouth, from his ears. And the minute he stopped moving, I said, my God, that man is dead. I've never seen a dead man in my life. Then another young lady with a baby in her arm got off the train, and the baby started to cry. The SS walks over to her, points, keep it quiet. So she tried to keep the baby quiet. So no matter how hard she tried, the baby started to cry twice as hard. That's when he walked over to her, grabbed the baby by the legs, and threw it against the train. Then I knew I'm in hell. Oh, then I knew this is not anymore Dan Camier. This is hell. Hell on earth. From about 3,500 people, we had to line up. Women and children on the left, anybody over 50 on the left, people with canes all on the left. From about 3,500 turned down to about 2,000. Then we had to line up 5 abreast, and the infamous, famous German doctor, I don't know if it was Mengele or not, I don't know. Mengele, his nickname was the Angel of Death. He's the one who decides who's to live and who's to die. With a flick of his finger, he decided left, right, left, right. We advanced 5 abreast, I'm in the middle. The 2 on my left, on the left. Me on the right. The 2 on the right, on the left too. When I looked on the left, I saw elderly people, babies, women with children, so I knew I'd be better off on the right side. It just hit me like a ton of bricks. I'd be better off to be on the right side. Where are these people going? They are not going to be they'll be taken to the camp in trucks. They don't have to walk. And I was so naive, I believed them. Then from the 3,500 to 2,000, down to 700 who actually entered the camp. 700 people. As we entered the camp, and I saw that big famous sign, Arbeit macht frei, it hit me very hard. I said, God forbid if Germany wins the war. I'll never make it. And this was just the first couple of hours. Once inside the camp, we had to get completely undressed, naked. Don't forget, this was October 1942. If I was cold then, I was freezing in the nude. When we were in the first camp, Auschwitz, because our transports were all from Belgium. And they knew that Antwerp was the diamond capital of the world. And they figured, who knows how much diamonds these people brought with them. Some of them were extremely poor, but they had no idea. As we stood completely in the nude, we had to bend over and with a flashlight They're shining in our rectum to see if we're hiding diamonds. They told us we're going to be taking showers. We were hoping that the water will be warm, ice cold water. And the SS walking around with the dogs make sure that we are under the water. Just when people started to drop left and right, I don't know, they had heart attacks or whatever. But I just felt, but when I didn't see them moving and the water just was dropping on them, I thought for sure that they must have died. Then we had to line up again, soaking wet, running to the other end of the camp. We had to line up again where we were being tattooed. Everybody was given a number on their arm. My number was 72,585. When I asked the prisoner, because it was also the prisoners who tattooed our arms, they shaved our hair, every pubic hair, every hair on your body was removed by other prisoners. When I asked the prisoner who put that number on my arm, I said, what does it mean? He said, you're the 72,585th prisoner. I said, well, how many people are in the camp? He said, about 30,000. So where are the rest of them? And they pointed to the chimney, which was spewing flames. He says, all these people that came with you went to the crematorium, from the crematorium to the gas chambers. And this is the flames that you see. Say, what are you talking about? I was so naive, I thought these were the kitchens. Says, you have something else coming to you. This is just the beginning. But make sure, do what you're told. God willing, you'll make it. Wake up call, 4 o'clock. Roll call, 5 o'clock. 6 o'clock we went to work from 6 to 6. When we came home, 2 slices of bread, which will have to last until the next evening, 24 hours. We worked extremely hard. What I did, I still don't know. But when we came back from work in the evening, roll call lasted more than an hour. Roll call lasted 2, 3 hours, at times even 4 hours. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 9, 10 o'clock at night, we were still standing there, and it was cold. One night when we came back again, a prisoner was missing, and by that time, roll call was getting close to midnight. We are not going into our barracks until they find the missing person. I can't find a word to describe the agony. That's when, for the first time, I saw some prisoners running to the electric wire. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, they're going to kill themselves. They're going to electrocute themselves. But that's exactly what they wanted. The minute they grabbed the electric wires, the blood kept coming down their arms, their eyes bulging out of their head, they were dead. And would you believe it, I envied them? They're not suffering anymore. And it was only about 3 or 4 months in the camp. I can't find a word to describe. But then they found out that the person who was missing, they found him. It seems that when we came into the camp after work, he had a bad case of diarrhea. And he ran to the outside latrines, and because of maybe a heart attack or some weakness, he fell in backwards. They found him. They got a half a dozen prisoners to pull him out. They flashed him with the hose, and that's when we were allowed to go into the barrack. But by that time it was close to 4 o'clock, so forget the barrack, we're going straight to work.
Picture this, as he would say. 1951, I am now the mother of a new baby. It's about 30 below in an Ottawa winter that's 10 times worse than this. And David comes down in his bathrobe. It's a plush one. And I said, I'm not ready to give you breakfast yet. Oh, no, I don't want breakfast. He said, I'm going to conduct an experiment. I said, what kind of an experiment are you going to conduct? He said, well, I'll tell you. He said, do you have a big kettle, a big pail of a kettle? I said, yeah, I got something like that. He said, I want you to put in a lot of water, and if you have any stones or anything that's rotten. And may I ask where you're off to? He said, yes, I'm going out in the garden. I said, it's about 8 feet of snow out there. I said, what kind of an experiment are you conducting? So I'll tell you when I come back. I said, I said, how long do you intend to be out there? Because it's going to take a while to make this soup. And he said, I don't think it'll take too long. He goes outside, and less than 5 minutes later, he's in. This is exactly the way he did it. And I said, well, what now? I said, have you conducted your experiment? He said, yes. I said, did you succeed? He said, yes. He said, now I know what would have happened. What would have happened or could have happened when I was in Auschwitz during the winter. And I'm starting to hear stuff that I'd never heard before. And he said that because some prisoners had done something to offend the Nazi commandant, that they had to put some of the prisoners out all night. So David was one of the ones who made a bad move, and he ended up between 2 rows of electrical barbed wire fences in his prison clothes in the middle of a winter, a Polish winter. And he says that something unusual happened. He said when he closed his eyes, his mother's voice and his mother's image came to him, and she said to him in Yiddish, don't cry, you'll be all right. You'll be fine. And he survived. And if that isn't a miracle, I don't know what is.
We were given 2 cigarettes a month. I don't know if it was tobacco or grass or straw, whatever. And I felt if I can barter with other prisoners for food, for a ration of bread. A gentleman walks up to me and said, what do you want for your 2 slices, for your 2 cigarettes? I said, 1 ration of bread. And he stood there with his 2 slices. He looked at me and said, would you take 1 slice? I said, no. 2 slices. Otherwise, no deal. He says, can I take 1 bite out of a slice? Just a small bite. I said, no. He gave me 2 slices of bread. I gave him the 2 cigarettes. And a few days later, I found out that he had died. And I took it personal. I felt I am responsible for that. But then again, I didn't want to die. I just kept hoping for the best. One Sunday afternoon, when we did not have to work, I was going through the gutters, seeing if I can find a rotten potato or anything that I could put in my mouth. I saw somebody approaching me. I stopped in my tracks. I said, I know you. He looked at me. He says, are you sure? I said, your name is Lipschitz? He says, yes. Your father had a bakery? He says, yes. And you live such and such a street down the street where I live? He says, yes. I said, my God, I know you. But then he looked at me and said, but who are you? He didn't recognize me. I was already 3 months in the camp. Skinny, bald, walk around with a striped uniform, cap. I can imagine that he did not recognize me. This was only after 3 months. When I told him who I am, he started to cry. Don't cry. We'll live together. We'll sleep together. We'll make it. The war, this was only in 1942. We'll make it. We'll survive. We'll stick together. We'll live together. We'll make it. Did I make him feel better? He started to cry twice as hard. I said, easy does it. We'll make it. He said, I have some terrible news for you. You'll tell me tomorrow. I said, no, I want to tell you right now because it's on my chest. Your mother and your 2 sisters were on my train. Once a month, we did not have to go to work. We had no idea at the beginning why, but then we found out. Inspection, selection, skinny prisoners, people with black and blue marks, extremely skeleton. These people were picked up right before the gas chambers. We had to stay completely in the nude all day long. The doctor with his entourage walked in. The minute he pointed, his assistant took down the number. Once he took down the number, you know that man won't be sleeping in his bunk tonight. Can you imagine what I went through every month for a year? Stood there, I remember scratching my thumb, my finger to see if I can get some blood and rub it on my face. He looked at me, walked by. America. And I went through this every month for a whole year. Can you imagine? There are no words. Agony, it's putting it mildly. I can't find the words. Anyway, they picked 2,500 prisoners to be sent to another camp. We thought this is more than meets the eye. This is definitely the gas chamber. Because whenever the camp was at full capacity, transport that came in from all over Europe, Belgium, Holland, France, Germany, from all over Europe, when the camp was at full capacity, the whole transport went to the gas chamber. They didn't even have a selection. And we figured maybe the camp is at full capacity, these 2,500 people are going to the gas chambers. But we found out it was not the gas chamber, that we were being sent to another camp. They took us to Warsaw. What a mess. What a mess of the Warsaw ghetto. Our job was to break down the bricks, all the buildings that were standing, tear down the bricks, clean them up, put them on the side. There was not even a camp. We slept outdoors, and because it was so suddenly planned, they didn't even plan our rations. We didn't even get food. One day as I was working, shoveling and loosening up bricks, I saw the earth moving. I thought this must be an earthquake. A sewer door opened. I see men climbing out. If I thought I was skinny, you should have looked at him. He looked at me, I looked at him, and I'm standing there with my shovel. And the very first thing he says, "Bist du Yid?" In other words, "Are you a Jew?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Is the war over?" I didn't have a heart to tell him that the war just began. He says, "Who are you?" He says, "Well, when they started the uprising, we fought, and we hid in the sewers. Some of them hid on roofs, and when they started to bomb every building one after the other, we felt the safest places to be in the sewers. And when they started to bomb building after building, people started to jump off the roofs." I looked at him, I said, "We won't make it." He said, "Come down with me, I'll show you, I'll introduce you to the other Jewish people below." I went down the rackety stairs, about 20 of them walking around with a sheet around them. I said, "How did you manage? How long are you here already?" He says, "About 6 weeks." "How do you manage?" "Well, as long as we had something to barter with, the Polish people would bring us food. We'd give them the belt, we'd give them the gold of our teeth, we'd give them anything for food. The minute we didn't have anything to barter with, they stopped coming." So I could imagine what he went through. His name was Katzenellenbogen. I said, "If I'm back tomorrow, I'll be glad to come and talk to you, if they send me to the same location." The next day I came by. We made the arrangement I should knock at the sewer. He opened it. No, I couldn't open it, so I managed with all my power to open it. I climbed down. By then all of them were lying on the ground. So I knew they had all died. They hadn't eaten for a month. Can you imagine? I saw Katzenellenbogen sitting at the table, a rickety chair. And I walked over to him and I said, "Katzenellenbogen, I'm here." And 2 or 3 times he didn't move. But when I went a little harder, he turned and he fell over. And when I looked at him, I realized that he had died. We were there for about a year. The Russians were getting closer. We went on a transport. They said that we are going to another camp. And this is the first time I realized that we are going on a dead march. We've heard of dead marches after the war in the winter. But this was the first dead march in the summer, the very first dead march, August 1944. From hunger, you die slowly. You die from hunger. You just pass away. You just die. From thirst, it affects your brains. People drank their own urine. We left Warsaw for about 5 days until we arrived in a small town by the name of Kutno. Not a drop of water. People who could not walk were shot and left right there and then. When we arrived in Kutno, they had trains already set up, and they said from now on the trip will continue in cattle trains. But to show his good intentions, we are arriving at a river, and we will be able to get water. When we heard water, it's like saying, God is here. He said, but only on one condition. 100 prisoners at a time are allowed in the water. The minute they come back, the next 100. Don't forget, we hadn't seen water for over a week. August 1944. People went crazy. I must have been crazy too. But the minute we arrived at that river, pandemonium, like a stampede. Everybody, about 3,000 people, rushed towards the water. And the yelling, stop, halt, halt. We could not have cared less. We saw the water. And I ran, and before I even knew it, I was up to my eyes in water. And splashed and splashed and splashed. But I took a look on my side, and I saw the SS setting up machine guns. But I figured this is not important. Water. But then all of a sudden when I stopped for a minute, I heard the shooting, the machine guns. And I take a handful of water, and it's red. And I lick it, and it's blood. And this is when I saw for the first time about 20, 30 prisoners floating on the water. I ran back so fast because I felt that I managed to get rid of a little of my thirst, but this was just the beginning. Cattle trains were ready to take us further. 100 prisoners in one cattle train. 100 prisoners, no sitting, no lying, like sardines standing. 100 prisoners. Horrendous. No facilities, everything is standing up. If this was bad, the main doors had to be free. So they squeezed more, 50 on each side. If this was bad, they locked the doors. And when I heard the click of the lock, I can't find the words. And they told us it will take a couple of days. 5 days until we arrived in Dachau. Doors opened, everybody out. From about 100, maybe 50, maybe 60, climbed out. And all the ones who had died, for the first time they could fall over. They had died of heart attacks or whatever. The filth, if I may be blunt, the excrement, the smell. Oh my God. So far, so good. Went into Dachau, and they never realized that it's that from other prisoners what we went through. I was in Dachau for about 8 months. The work was horrendous. Every day, 50, 60, maybe 100 prisoners for the gas chambers. I don't know how I made it. But I was just waiting to die. I knew I'm not going to make it. It was April 1945. We knew the war was over. We also knew that Germany had lost the war. But I also knew that I'm not going to make it. I was lying on my bunk, just waiting to die. I give up. I just can't. And I had a skinny little blanket on top of me that I removed. And I took a look at my 2 legs. 2 sticks like that. And I felt so sorry for me, I started to cry. And the assistant walked by and he heard me crying. Get up. I wish I could, but when he took out his revolver, I got up. And I thought for sure he was going to shoot me, because I remember from experiences about somebody who forgot to take off his shoes, he shot him right between the eyes. So I figured if he has his gun in his hand, he's going to shoot. And I grabbed him by his belt. Bitte, bitte, nicht schießen. Please, please don't shoot. I must have touched his heart. But instead he gave me, with his revolver, right a bang on my head. And all of a sudden I fell down. And all of a sudden I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. No pain. No. All of a sudden I felt good. I didn't feel anything. But then slowly, slowly my hearing came back. And this is my hearing, affected me even still today. The eardrums are permanently damaged. That's when I climbed on my hands and knees out of the barrack. And what do I see? No SS. I look at the sentry post. No SS. I look at the front gate. Open. Oh my God. Am I dreaming? Is this it? I made it? Other prisoners were running around, the one who still had some energy, because they were starving, they were eating anything they could find. Grass, straw, mice, rats. They ate whatever they could, stuff it in their mouth. All of a sudden I see an American tank, I didn't know it was an American tank, rolling into the entrance. And I stood there like that, opened the turret, and a black soldier, he didn't climb out. He was petrified. He's never seen me. I can't find the word to describe. Wild animals. That's what we were. Wild animals running around and stuff things in their mouth to eat. He threw me a piece of gum and says, "How you doing, young fella?" And I stood there, and I didn't know what to say, and I didn't know what to do. And then he kept going. Then American soldiers started to come in. That's when I realized the first time I made it. So far, I made it. But when the other American soldiers saw the famine they started to throw their food rations to the prisoners. They had good intentions. And the other prisoners, including me, when they started to grab their food rations, like little boxed lunches, they shoved it in their mouth. Big mistake. As they shoved it in their mouth, it went in one way, it went out the other way. That's when I knew better not eat it. Then the medics arrived, and I saw all these prisoners lying there where stuff was running out from the behind. He said, "Stop feeding these people, they're killing them." Well, they all, of course, meant well. Two or 3 days later, I woke up in a hospital. And I woke up and a German nurse walked by and she yelled out loud, "Oh, he's alive, he's alive." She comes up to me, she says in German, "You okay?" Whatever I think she said. She said, "Where am I?" "You're in the hospital." "Where are we? What date is it?" "April the 29th. "This is the day of my birthday." And she called over 2 other German nurses and they started to sing happy birthday. About a week later, I was back home in my hometown in Antwerp. And that's when I felt the agony more than ever. Because that's when I realized for the very first time, I'm the only one from my whole family who survived. Parents, sisters, uncles, aunts, cousins, and I felt guilty. How did I make it? I don't know. I kept going to the Jewish community to find out did anybody else come back, and I said after 2 or 3 weeks, you should realize that nobody will come back anymore. The best thing that happened to me when I came to Canada, an uncle of mine, who was my father's brother, he wrote to the Jewish community in Antwerp to find out if anybody of the family survived. They said, the only person who survived is your nephew. He made arrangements for me to come to Canada. Came to Canada. Within 6 months, I met my wife. We were married within a year. And this is the best thing that happened to me.
We set off in a small car with a couple who owned the car and who were neighbors in a small town. And David had talked to them about the Chemin des Juifs, and they knew about his background. And so these people were really anxious to drive us to that place in France. So we find a tourist bureau, and sure enough, there's maps of that area. And I go through the maps, and I said, I think this is what you want. So we opened it up, and we looked around, and we find the road. I said, this is it. That's it, Le Chemin des Juifs. And our driver and his wife plunked us back in the car, and off we scoot, and we get to that area. It was rather wild. Nobody had been taking care of leaves and the trees, and it was messy. It looked definitely abandoned. And we headed towards an area that David thought had to do with the place where the other prisoners who had passed away had to be buried. And we didn't see any coffins, so we didn't see anything really. It's just a hole in the ground. And David said, and I think he had tears in his eyes that he was holding back. He said, this is where we said Kaddish for the dead. The people who had driven us there were not Jews, but they understood what that meant. What really shocked me, and I'm getting shivers now when I'm telling you this, is when David looked down this road, which was partly cement and partly mud, and you could see the footprints, the human footprints of men who walked in bare feet. And you could see the paw prints of the dogs, the shepherd dogs, which would be biting them if they didn't walk fast enough. And you could see the boots, these military boots of the soldiers. And then David told me that two of his uncles from Belgium had not been shipped to Europe, to Eastern Europe. They had been shipped to France. And they each worked, unbeknownst to the other, in two different work camps, making leather boots for the Nazis. They survived. They came back, and when David came back into Antwerp, they were there. And they offered David a place to stay until his uncle in Canada had made arrangements to bring him to Canada.
Every day was hell. I figured 3 years, that's 1,000 days. The pièce de résistance, I made it.
you.